M. The Media Project. The Vermont Technology Alliance. The VTTA is the only statewide organization focused on Vermont's tech business sector and entrepreneurs. Our business members are Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, small business owners, and soloists. We provide advocacy, recruiting of tech talent, events, and other networking opportunities. We are the heart of the tech ecosystem in Vermont. Become a member now at vtta.org. The Vermont Technology Alliance. Tech thrives here.
Oh, I'm in the virtual studio this evening with my good friend Lauren Bass. She is executive director of Launch VT, working out of Burlington, Vermont, the Queen City, one of the greatest cities in the United States, in my humble opinion. Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, Scott. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. I'm glad that you could make this with your busy schedule. Launch VT just launched another cohort.
We did. It just got kicked off last week. We have 8 fresh startups who are accelerating for the spring. So to say that I am working hard and scurrying hard and hustling hard is an understatement. But for you, my friend, Scott Graves, how could I pass up a possibility to be on your podcast? I'm very proud to be here.
I feel honored. And, I have to say, as somebody who also has sat in the seat of doing all the stuff that it takes to make the actual daily routine of an accelerator go, like when you're in charge, suddenly your job becomes very, very mundane. I mean that in a good way per se, but you know what I'm saying? Like when your mentors and the people are doing their thing, and then if there's little emergencies and little fires that need to be put out in the background, it goes to the executive director to do that mostly.
Oh, for sure. But it's, at the end of one of the things that makes Launch VT so fun, obviously, is besides the people, is at the end of our program, we have the Shark Tank of Vermont, our demo night. That's a 350-person event. So I am running the accelerator and being a party planner. Effectively, simultaneously, and herding the cats. So we have a coach for every one of our startups. So that's their one-on-one coach who works with them through the accelerator, and then I work with about 35 or so mentors, and we do 10 learning sessions. And each one of those learning sessions have at least one guest facilitator, and then I do a number of practice sessions for a pitch competition at the end. It is. It's mundane, but it is definitely high octane. I refer to it as the drink by the fire hose season of Launch VT.
That's actually a better way to characterize it than I did. Mundane really isn't the word. It's not mundane like boring mundane, but it's like all the little details, right? We're all not working with a staff of 50 people. That's
right. It's funny. I do use the royal we. And my pronouns are me, myself, and I.
There you go.
That's how we roll at Launch VT. I should say though, I need to give credit where credit is due. Launch VT is a division of the Lake Champlain Chamber, and I have surrounding me an amazing team of people who, although they may not be running the accelerator per se, they believe in the royal we. They believe in what we do. They believe in what the program is doing. And so I always have, in my back pocket, a passionate partner who wants to help me get over the line. Nonetheless, I am a division of one running an accelerator that's large. So, but I'm so proud of it and so proud of what we do.
Good stuff. So here we are, right? And we've had conversations in the past revolving around the nature of venture capital and the nature of venture capital here in our rural state of Vermont. And so, talk to us. First off, what's your perspective generally on venture capital? How does a relatively rural place like Vermont, we're not where the other 80% of most venture capital is expensed here. But we are at this sort of vanguard of the decentralization of venture capital and how you get access to it and where that happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's such a great question.
Yeah.
We are nascent in our evolution. We are young. Ooh. We're at the beginning, which actually I think makes it really, really exciting and really interesting. So I'm going to correct you. Vermont is the second most rural state in the United States. So we're not one of the. We are the other.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Only Wyoming has us smoked in that department.
And they're about 1,000 times bigger than us. Maybe not 1,000 times. I'd say
yes,
square
geographically
mileage,
speaking, there's a lot more of Wyoming than there is of Vermont. But there's a few more Vermonters than there are of Wyomingites. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but yeah, no, I think as far as venture capital is concerned, we're kind of in this interesting spot. VC really became what it is today, or what we know of today in the mid 80s. It's been around a bit longer than that, but when you think about just the explosive growth in the Bay Area, that's when in the mid 80s, early 80s, the VC in the United States started to take off. Mm-hmm. And it's just been on that positive growth curve ever since. And Vermont has not quite kept up with that, which is because of the type of, agrarian economy that we have largely been, the fact that we're one of the least populated, actually the second least populated, that's us in Wyoming. And that's important because when you think about hubs like the Bay Area or Austin or Boston or New York, what do they all have going for themselves? And that's really high concentrations of people and really high concentrations of usually academic settings that are creating a lot of IP that is being commercialized and going out to the public and creating all these awesome opportunities. We barely have that, right? We have one large flagship institution, UVM. Yeah. And so they're really the only point of origination for IP. And we're just small, I mean, we're still talking about folks not having access to broadband, right?
Yeah, it's true. So, and isn't it also that a place like the greater Boston area, a place like San Francisco Bay, it's not just that there's a concentration of people there, it's the churn, right?
The churn.
There's a constant...
it's a saturation of a lot of different things. It's a saturation of finance. It's saturation of, like I said, higher education institutions. It's saturation of resources. The competition itself actually lends itself to higher quality.
That's right.
Right. One of our issues when you're in a really unsaturated market is that the competition is relatively low. But that's also what I think. I don't want to say that the competition in Vermont is low. That's not necessarily true from the standpoint that with a lack of resources, you have to be extra wily to figure out how to rise to the top. So it's a different type of competition, I think.
Yeah.
But
there isn't a lot of depth, right? So if you have a company that actually can stand for some time, and they go away, and they were maybe employing 5 to 12 people. Right. We talked a little earlier about the different circumstances of how that sometimes happens, right? But their absence is felt, I think, more in the community that they originated in and the region, simply because there isn't depth, right? You might have a med tech company in your locale, but you don't have 50.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. It's infrastructure wise, it's policy wise. The list is on and on. It's really, really nuanced. That's one thing I think a lot of people don't realize, that growth entrepreneurship is highly nuanced and it's predicated on so many different variables. Like I said, the intersection of business and government, the intersection of development, the intersection of IP creators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's such a long list, and it's not like one thing makes it work and the other thing doesn't. It is speaking to a man from the music industry. It is not a cacophony, but a symphony.
I like that. It's orchestrated.
Stakeholders.
Well, to your point, it's orchestrated.
Yeah, to a
And it
degree.
has, and the nuance, I think I want to ask this as a question, although it sounds like a statement. The nuance comes in industry to industry, subsections of an industry,
Yeah.
right? Like very specialized things like biotechnology. You know, it
Right.
really does matter what you're working on and the combination of assays that become a body of research. And
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like there's a ton of nuance there. So you need that depth of expertise on the venture capital side to understand the technology.
Right. Yeah. You need
To know the
actually the
difference.
marketplace. Yeah. And the marketplace too sort of like delineates that. And that's why you wind up at, you keep referring to med tech, for example. That's why Boston is like a med tech hub. It's, it's got amazing hospitals.
And they've got,
institutions.
10, 12,000 postdocs willing to work for close to freemium
Yes.
in order to churn the body of research necessary to come up with new IP,
Correct. And
If you either
the
have that or
quality
you
of the
don't.
capital is really high.
And the
So the
quality of
folks
the
who
cap-
invest have deep expertise in their industry and provide not just dollars to founders, but their mentorship and the type of strategic guidance that really, unless you've been there, done it, seen it, felt it, and everything in between, you can't provide anything better than that for a founder, right? It's so that's the other thing too. Like VC, really good VC is actually solving an information gap. That's meaning to say that you have investors, you have LPs who believe in these funds and put their money into these funds, and they leave it up to these funds to solve the question mark. How good are these startups, right? Every time you see like Sequoia invests in a startup, that's an immediate validation. And they're closing that question mark. If you wanted to be an angel investor, right, like you talk about roulette, right? But your VC is solving that question mark for you. And the more that you have information and understanding, the higher degree of, I'm going to go and use economics now, the higher degree that you're going to have rational investors because information is available and understood. So that's the other thing too. It's like we have a saturation problem with lack of population, lack of large institutions pumping out IP, but we also have some really, investing here is fairly new, right? Everyone thinks of Vermont as like maple syrup and skiing and cheese. People don't realize that Vermont's biggest export is microchips.
Right. And has been, by the way, for what, 50 or 60 years or something like that.
It has been,
you know what I mean?
thanks to IBM.
Yeah.
But in that same vein, too, I mean, the type of growth entrepreneurship that's going on here that's even attractive to VC dollars, it's only been going on for like 20 or 25 years.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's a lot of different things.
So I have a lot of questions based on everything you just said in the last 2 to 3 minutes. Before we start talking about the other facets that affect, the disbursement of venture capital in this great state we love, on the finance side, right? What are the things that are either missing or could be done differently, right? Because much of what you just said points to all these other factors in an economy. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I want to also get to those. But before we do that, I wanted to see what your thoughts are on the finance side. You characterize it. Is it something that's missing? Is it something that is here, but we need to proliferate it? And there's a way to do that, or, I think we both agree that there needs to be more depth to venture capitalists and the variation in how they underwrite and all that kind of stuff. But then we can get into a question of like, well, how do we proliferate that,
I mean, a lot of it is, I always feel funny saying this in Vermont because so many people here, whenever I say free markets or free enterprise,
they start freaking
people are like, no, it's scary. But a lot of it is the fact that our marketplace hasn't really had a chance to mature, right? And as that marketplace matures, as more, opportunities come online, but not only that, prove to be successful, the marketplace is going to identify where our area of expertise is. And it's also going to identify our best investors, and it's going to help sort of like set the tone of what we're going to do in the future.
Breaking Housing Matters is a national housing initiative designed to build housing profitably. It is a first-of-its-kind initiative currently being piloted in Vermont, USA. BHM brings multiple key stakeholders from the housing development ecosystem together to solve the dual issues of affordability and profitability. Participate in an all ships rise approach designed by a multiplicity of internationally recognized experts in development, economics, housing, and governance. Learn more and purchase the book Custom Made Housing for a New World Disorder by BHM founder Peter DeCrassel at breakinghousingmatters.org. Press and program inquiries should please contact our agent at scott@smgravesassociates.com.
I want to circle back a little bit because I want to make sure I understood your question.
Yeah.
Give me the question one more time so I can
The
really
question is,
answer.
before we start talking about the other major systems within the economy that we can talk about in addressing, how do we attract more venture capital from afar? How do we build or grow more venture capital from within?
Oh,
right?
Sure. It's the finance side.
Side,
Now I remember. Yeah. Sorry. So the finance side is absolutely a part of it. I think it's actually one of the biggest ones. And I say that because one of the things we don't talk about here in Vermont, because we have invested differently for so long and not necessarily been a high growth, high tech entrepreneurship ecosystem, is that we really don't talk about VC finance. And VC finance is a subset of finance of its own. Right.
Well, this is a greater problem with the way we educate people. And I would argue that a lot of people aren't supposed to know about, equity financing versus debt financing, or how do I get access to this, or,
Right. Well, I mean, as far as I know, and I'm making this a blanket statement. Honest to God, I'm probably going to be wrong and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. But as far as I know, from my vantage point, I don't think we have any professors who are strictly instructing or publishing on VC finance and the strategy that goes in behind that. And here's the thing, right? If you go to, the Sloan School or HBS or Boston University or Bay Area or whatever, you've got really, really deep expertise in VC finance, which we don't have. And here's how I see it playing out. I was on a panel, I guess it was about 6 months ago, and someone in the audience got up and asked, and they were like, what is it that kills a startup? Is it, X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, whatever? And I was just like, it could be all of those things, but really at the end of the day, what I think is the biggest cancer for us is the fact that founders who don't understand VC finance and don't understand the strategy behind it are doomed, because they're not going to understand how you need to align incentives from your current set of investors for the next time you need to make that next round of investment, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that funding is a multi-step process. You go out in the market today, you raise, you close some dollars, you run again, and then before you know it, you're up against a wall and you have to do another fundraising. And time again, I think that's happened for some Vermont startups, is that they wind up having to take a down round. So they've either been overvaluated the first time around and they've sold for too cheap. It means the next guy coming in is going to be like, no, dude, this is a Village bicycle. I'm not going to invest in that, crazy. Or it's, right of first refusal is just ridiculous, or you name it all. So if we're not really talking about how VC finance is special, that it's just, it's a slightly different animal. It is the zebra from the horses.
Does part of that
right?
get mitigated? This is not just a Vermont thing. This is a national thing. But does it get partially mitigated by not only democratizing venture capital? In other words,
yes.
In plain English, we start talking about it with more of the population and much earlier.
Exactly.
Right? Like
100%.
I cannot remember, even though I went to a very innovation-oriented university, certainly before university, this was not even something you could learn in, say, high school, right? Also, I just think there's so many really, truly great ways to access a lot of the student population, both undergrad and even pre-undergrad, high school, middle school, even, right?
100%.
To make this part of the innovation sector sexy. Yeah. Make it something like, hey, I want to do this. You know what I mean? For that, plus the knowledge you need, because you're probably going to be in some kind of an innovation-based program, right? I mean, more people have to become entrepreneurs because for 30 years, we don't create jobs the same way we did the 100 years prior to that.
Of course not. We're in a changing economy.
I mean,
can I jump in, because you're getting me I'm getting all feverish and excited over here.
Please do.
Which is, you're absolutely right. We need to be, it's like we need to be talking about it more widely. And I feel like everyone sort of understands that there's accounting, right? Like that's a whole spectrum of itself, or banking. But as you said, like we don't talk about VC finance necessarily here. I don't know what it's like elsewhere. If I'm imagining that it's probably much more readily available. I know it's available to undergrads. I don't know about high schoolers or what I'm really referring to, but for us, we should be talking about it. And basically, I want to say, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I just had a knee-jerk reaction. Anybody who has a kid who thinks that they're going to build an app someday needs to know
right on
VC finance.
Yeah.
And every entrepreneurship club for upperclassmen in high schools should be doing a module on VC finance and making it very clear to these students that non-dilutive cash is a totally different animal from selling equity and then bringing a partner on board and having a whole bunch of voices to answer to, and also realize that it's the most expensive type of money you can take on. That's the one thing that always takes people by surprise. They think, oh, I don't want to take on a bank loan because then I'm going to have debt and I'll have to pay interest, and that sucks. And I'm like, if you're parting with equity for your business, you're paying way more than that interest.
And there are people who for some time will chase after, frankly, the wrong kind of money for some period of time before really figuring out, what it is that they really could or should be doing, simply because they weren't lucky enough to have the right. This is why I'm saying, a more dispersed and consistent sort of introduction.
Oh, I think you're getting me all excited. I would love to see, like I said, every entrepreneurship club in a high school somewhere should at least be talking about that. Like they should at least be aware that there is some gnarly animal out there that if they want to be hotshot entrepreneurs someday and they want to be like, what was that HBO show that used to make me laugh so hard?
Oh, that was
Silicon Valley?
Yeah,
I think it was just Silicon Valley. Yeah, and it's like you want to be that. You want to be like the next guy who, creates Facebook or what. I don't know. We had our orientation at LaunchPT last week for our accelerator, and one of my favorite things to do is to point out that California is the 5th largest economy in the world, and then ask everyone, why is it the 5th largest economy in the world? And it's not oranges.
No, it's not Mel Gibson. It's
definitely not Mel Gibson.
That's a bad. I don't know why of all the actors and actresses, Mel Gibson came to mind.
Dude, Freudian. I don't know.
Have no idea. I think it was more
Easter was last week.
I know. Too soon. Too soon. So we this last couple of years, especially, every Startup Boston, startup this, startup that, every conference I've gone to, everywhere that I've gone to some kind of public function, everybody's talking about the decentralization, right? the first project that I participated in here in Vermont, we brought on a national partner who is a large fund and a very successful accelerator program. And they only work in rural places, right? So there's never been a time before where there's more people working on this idea of decentralizing the map and getting access. Now, as a person who came to this from the broader realm of economic development and property development, right? And seeing how, in theory, venture capital can play a role in helping to rebuild neighborhoods, right? Rebuild deindustrialized communities, right? All of this seems in my mental map that it can all connect, and yet it's really freaking hard, in plain English, when you are trying to marry I'll call it amenities like venture capital in a place that's never really had a history and a culture behind that, right? Mm-hmm. And the property, all of the things that have to come together, right? So let's talk about some of those things right now, right? Like, we have a huge housing crisis in Vermont. I mean, we'd have more venture capital if we had more teams, but we can't have more teams or more teams that stay, right? Because once they don't live in a dorm room anymore, guess what? Can't find a place to live, right? Like that's an existential threat to more widespread venture capital here in the state. I think
it's huge. Oh, it is. I couldn't agree with you more. It is massively problematic, but I mean, this is where it's also like, oh, I might be like lighting myself on fire for this one, but let me just take us back. I very much care about the environment. I am proud of the fact that we have such a healthy ecosystem here when it comes to our biological side of things. I love being out in the countryside, but the fact of the matter is that we've made it very, very difficult for people to develop properties here.
Yeah.
So when we sit here and go, why do we have a housing crisis? It's like, well, let's look at our recent policy.
Right.
you know? So it's not a chicken and the egg. It's that delicate balance, and it's it's tough. I think here in Vermont, and especially for someone like me who's lived in the Boston area, has lived in Houston, has spent time in Boulder. I lived overseas. I lived in Hong Kong for over a decade. I've seen these like really hyper competitive marketplaces and what they're capable of doing, and just the tremendous amount of value that can come of it. But the fact of the matter is that I don't want to say that policy allowed things to run wild, but policy enabled value creation to happen more easily than I think here in Vermont. Right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. Things like zoning, certain safety laws, though they have meant some good, right? They've also meant that people, housing is an example, much like the venture capital space and team innovation that goes along with it. These are complex adaptive systems. So in short, we've enacted policies over time that solved problems when they were initiated, but they've long since stopped solving that problem. And what they've really done over time is they've prevented those complex adaptive systems from doing exactly what they're designed to do.
I mean, look at COVID. I live on a lane with 6 other houses. Literally 4 of them are transplants from outside of the state. But so yes, I agree with all of this. But the root of the problem is also another information problem. And with states with small economies or states with very limited budgets, we are not able to go out and hire a whole legion of economists to model out these policies.
Yeah.
So that 5 or 10 years down the road, we have some predictive quality to what it is that we write into policy. And that absolutely goes hand in hand with business, particularly startups. Startups are very, very sensitive to policy, and by association, so are VCs. If a VC smells for a second that they're not going to have an easy regulatory process to get through, or they're not going to have a friendly policymakers who are willing to really understand what they're doing, I mean, why would you invest? I think that's turning around for sure. I think we can all say Vermont is changing, but why are we where we're at versus New Hampshire or Maine? we have not been aggressive enough about our pro-business policies, particularly our startup policies. And it's a variety of reasons. It could be lack of infrastructure, lack of expertise, an unfortunate prevailing norm in our society here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think you're right. There, as far as, getting back to your point of decentralized VC or going out to these farther regions, I think that makes sense. Dollars flow a lot like rivers of water. They go to the path of least resistance. And, it is really easy to come to Vermont and get a big sniff of what our startup economy is doing and what we're up to. Whereas, you go to a highly complex ecosystem, it's really, really overwhelming. So, there's a reason to come in here, but we need to make sure that we have policies that enable the door to be open. And, I often think to myself, if I were a VC in Boston trying to figure out, do I want to put my dollars in Vermont or do I want to put my dollars in New Hampshire? It's easier. I don't want to say it's right, but it can be easier to think, oh, New Hampshire has no dividend tax, so I'm gonna put my dollars there.
You're going to definitely
right?
have some people that are simply going to do that. In Manchester, the results of that are clear. Manchester, New Hampshire.
Yeah, Manchester is amazing.
It's become a satellite like Worcester, Mass. has in the Commonwealth for the overspill of medtech and biotechnology, pharmaceutical companies.
So here's the thing, right? Like I just said, dollars are like water; they flow. We've got to be really easy to collect those dollars, right? Like I really hope in the coming years that our policymakers are more inclined to be welcoming of VC dollars and recognize the degree of value, that the multi-factor multiplier that comes with VC dollars coming to the state, rather than trying to prop up dying industries, which I'm sorry, as a state, we've done a lot. Yeah. That's how to get that VC money in here.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com. In the Jazz Room, we've met with many artists at the Pittsburgh International Jazz Festival. This time we're talking to saxophonist Chelsea Baratz and her dog, King. She talks about growing up in Pittsburgh and the musicians and teachers who encouraged her, and her CD, In Faith. And now, enjoy the show.
This is Chelsea Baratz inviting you to join me in the Jazz Room with host Joan Watson-Jones.
Hello, welcome to the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson-Jones. Thanks for stopping by. Come in, relax, enjoy some great jazz. Each week we present the music of independent jazz artists, as well as those we've grown to love through the years. And yes, of course, the legends. Today we welcome saxophonist Chelsea Baratz. We met briefly after her set at the Pittsburgh International Jazz Festival. We'll talk about her CD, In Faith. We've opened with Bruhala from that album, In Faith. Enjoy. Welcome, Chelsea Baratz, to the Jazz Room.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's so great to hear you here at the Pittsburgh International Jazz Festival.
Thank you.
You're a Pittsburgh girl.
I am, yeah, born and raised.
Born and raised. All right. So you've had a real interesting journey. I was doing a little, reading about you. Tell us, when you started getting into the music and all that.
I was really into the music from a young age, and what really got me started is I remember I was in, I think, the 4th grade, and the high school jazz band came around, and they gave a performance at the elementary school. And my experience with this was like, it was as if every day of my life before that day, I was like half asleep, and colors weren't that bright, and life didn't have any purpose. And the second I saw the jazz band performing, it was like I woke up and I snapped into consciousness, and I was like, whoa, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I do have to give a lot of credit to, like, I come from Upper St. Clair Township, and I have to give a lot of credit to how the arts and music program was back when I was a student there. I had really amazing teachers named Glenn Wayland and Frank Eisenreich, and they were just absolutely instrumental in, like, from an educational standpoint and within the public school system, for pouring into us. Like, Glenn Whalen started an extracurricular after-school jazz improvisation class in the middle school. And that's normally, like, curriculum-wise something you would do in the high school. So, and then Frank Eisenreich introduced me to Sean Jones, basically, when he moved into town, and sent me out to my first jam session at the Crawford Grill. He said, you guys need to go to the Crawford Grill tonight. Sean Jones is playing a gig and Roger Humphreys is running a jam session. So that's how I kind of got injected into the scene. And from there, it was really just, Roger and everybody else also pouring into me very much, and just showing a lot of support to young musicians.
When you went to high school,
yeah,
how did everything continue?
Well, it basically continued, Glenn Whalen and Frank Eisenreich are very close friends, so they had a thing where, they'd be looking for who's coming out of the middle school and going to be qualified to be in, like, the varsity high school jazz ensemble. So it continued with me, like, joining the jazz ensemble and, continuing doing, like, small group and large ensemble work within my school. But I think just having a teacher who was like, there's only so much I can do for you when it comes to actually playing jazz, and really him saying, you need to go out, you need to meet Sean Jones and Roger Humphreys and all these other incredible musicians who are in the scene, and let them take it from there, basically.
How did the rest of the life fit in with the jazz? The rest of your life fit in with the jazz? If you still had school, you still were a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very interesting life as a grade school age student, like middle school and high school. I was really into sports. I was into horses. I rode horses, and I just had a very kind of, I would call it like, not just suburban, but kind of rural life. I was really into the woods and the quiet and everything. So it was a big change to, like, say, oh, you want to go be a musician and be in this very cacophonous kind of lifestyle and environment to do everything. But I just knew, like, I had been bitten by the bug, and it wasn't really about how are you going to make music fit into your life. It was like, how are you going to make your life fit around this music? And it just, I just made very drastic changes, like my last year of high school, because it came to a point where it was like, are you going to be a scientist? Are you going to be this? Are you going to be a musician? And you had to pick one kind of at that point. And I was like, I think I'm going to pick music.
Here's another cut from that CD in Faith titled 601. Now tell us about your CD, Faith.
My CD In Faith, I started working on that in, like, right when I first moved to New York. It was right when I met Maurice Brown. I had been playing with his best friend, Corey Wilkes, who's another amazing trumpet player. He was like the first trumpet player who played with my band back then. I had set up a great band to go in the studio and record In Faith. And I already met Maurice in passing a couple times, but Corey said, I'm going to invite Maurice to the studio. You know, Maurice is really good in the studio. I don't know if you know this about him, but he's like kind of an aspiring producer at the time, right? So Maurice comes in, he sees I have a great band of musicians. I had some Pittsburgh cats in there, some New York cats. I had all my music written out and arranged and everything. And the only thing I didn't have a concept was how do you manage your time in a studio? Like, how do you get like 10 or 11 songs recorded in one day? And Maurice came in and heard us do one take of one song, and he was like, this is great. I think you just need me to structure your time for you. And that's how we started our like relationship, working on music together, and kind of our collaborative and producer-artist relationship, and really became a mentor to me. But Maurice was probably the most instrumental part of me working on In Faith, because I didn't have the experience to get everything out that needed to be expressed on that CD. It really took somebody with a producer's mindset and a visionary mindset to bring that to life.
Just going to interrupt for a minute. What's your Chihuahua's name?
Oh, this is King, and he is a Chihuahua Yorkie mix. I love the breed name Chorky.
Chorky.
Oh, just rolls off the tongue.
He's adorable because he was licking my ear earlier, and we will probably have a photo on the Jazz Room website with you and.
Yeah, with me and King. I love it. King is my soul dog, and I adopted him about 5 years ago. And if you ever see me on the road, either as a side woman or with my own band, you are very likely to meet King in person.
Well, it's so nice to meet you, King. Yes. Okay, now, did you write all the music on In Faith?
I did, yes.
Now, we will be playing cuts from that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to giving you this information so you can send me the tracks. Tell me some of what songs are very close to your heart that you wrote that are in
In Faith?
Yes.
I would say all those songs are super close to my heart, because kind of the process of being a composer is like, you'll write a lot of music, but not all of the songs will kind of make it to see the light of day. It's got to be the ones that kind of are musically stronger and also kind of mean more to you, because I think when something means a lot to you, it's going to be a more musically strong statement. So it just meant a lot to me to have these songs on In Faith, and they all mean a lot to me. They all came from kind of life-changing and life-affirming experiences that went into like launching yourself into being a young adult on your own, and being a young musician on your own, and kind of learning about love and heartache. And
give me specific songs.
Oh, specific
give
songs.
Give me a background from that song, since they're all part of you. Then you can tell me.
Well, I'd say the main one was letting go. Just the concept of that, like being able to let go and let God when you have a big loss or you have a big challenge in life. And, you know, letting go is not always a bad thing. I think it's like forgiveness. You know, people talk about forgiveness. Oh, why would you forgive that person? And really, forgiveness is not about you letting somebody who hurt you get off. It's about you letting go of something so you're able to move on and fill that space with something more meaningful in your life. I think Letting Go was probably one of the earliest and most meaningful tunes I wrote, because I really sat down in that headspace and that heart space of having felt lost and having felt out of control. And it's like when you're young like that and you've been sheltered and living with your parents and your family your whole life, you don't understand what it's like to have to go through major losses and challenges and not be able to do anything about it, or not have a support system to be like, hey, can you go make this better for me? And to really sit with that. So yeah, letting go for sure.
Listen now to that tune, Letting Go.
Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
Give me another song.
Let's see. I've got the track listings on.
All right, let's do that, because while you're doing that, this gives my audience a chance to have insight to the tracks that I play.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking, and I'd like, and I'm saying this, on our recordings so that people know. I want people to know about you through your music.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Well, I would say the title track is a very important song. In Faith is all about moving forward in faith when you don't know whether or not something is going to kind of work out. And that was what moving to New York was like for me. Like, I knew I had kind of outgrown Pittsburgh in a way that it wasn't really pushing me outside of my comfort zone the way that I wanted it to. And that's no slight to the scene here, because there's always been an incredible scene of people who have, like I said, poured into me, supported me, and taught me a lot. But I wanted to go to a scene that was bigger and would push you farther. And it was kind of terrifying to drop everything in life and pick up and move to New York. I had some personal circumstances that made me want to leave the school I was at, and kind of spurred me to make that move. But it really did take a lot of, like, what am I doing? Can I trust myself to do this? And moving forward and learning how to trust yourself. And Sentiments of Solitude was one of the first ballads that I ever wrote. And at the time, I had met Branford Marsalis. I was always a huge Uber fan of Branford when I was a young student in high school and college. So I got to meet him when he was on tour once and had gone to like Penn State or something, and a group of students from my school went and saw him. I remember asking him for a lesson and him being like, all right, fine, I'll give you a lesson. And I went down to his house in North Carolina to meet him. I actually had a family friend who lived a few doors down, kind of helped me stay down there for a few days. But we talked about music a lot in that hang, and Branford put me on to a poet named Rainer Maria Rilke. And Branford started talking about like life stuff with me, about how when you go on the road, you have to be so dedicated to that. And then when you come home, you have to like totally switch gears and like make time for your family and your wife and your baby. And he drove home the point of like, this is a kind of lonely lifestyle. But he's like, there's a difference between feeling loneliness and embracing solitude. And he told me about this Rilke quote that was like, if you really love somebody, you'll be the guardian of their solitude. And I think that just really hit me as a really young person, like a young teenage college student who's like, I don't even know how to be alone with myself and enjoy solitude. And I really explored that in the time of, experiencing one of my first heartbreaks and starting to really enjoy the process of being in solitude and what you can accomplish when you're kind of in stillness with yourself and your spirit.
Tell us a little bit about your musicians with you today here at the Pittsburgh International Jazz Festival.
Oh, this is a story here today. And I just want to start it off by saying everybody who was on the stage with me today at the gig, they're all very close friends and people I hold very dear. But I will say we had some unplanned things happen that went into our personnel situation today. But I'll start off by saying I have my very special surprise guest, Maurice Brown, on trumpet, come in and play with us today. I'm incredibly honored that he came and made the time to come in because he's got an incredibly busy touring schedule. So it's always a treat to have him and his energy imbued into the music. On the keys, I had my longtime bandmate Takahiro Izumikawa. He's an incredible Japanese keyboard player. He's a Japanese Blue Note artist, and he writes incredible original music. I definitely recommend anybody go check his stuff out. And he's just really important to me in my band, and kind of plays almost that like musical director role, because he's the one person there who like knows all my music without looking at a piece of paper type of vibe. So on the drums today, I wasn't able to have my normal longtime drummer. I have a drummer named Joe Blacks that's been playing with me for over 15 years. And I got a chance to play with an amazing young drummer who I first met when he was a Berklee student, and his name is Brian Richburg Jr. I actually met him when we were performing with a harpist I play with named Brandy Younger. And that was my chance getting, it was the kind of gig where they're putting some like Berklee students together with some pro musicians from New York, and a collaborative thing. And that was my first chance getting to play with him. And I've seen him graduate and move to New York and start to kind of take over that scene as a young drummer. And this was my first chance getting to have him play my music. So it was a really great opening experience for us to start building that relationship. And then on bass, I was supposed to have Ben Williams today, who was also supposed to play with Jose James. I love Ben. Ben and I moved to New York at the same time. We've been really close friends for a long time. And I've been touring with his band for probably the past 4 years more heavily. And Ben had, like, the flight that was supposed to get him to his layover in Chicago had a mechanical failure, so he was not able to make the flight. Now, in my tenure of playing with Ben, one of the amazing musicians that I've gotten to play with a lot on his gig is Julius Rodriguez, who we know is an amazing keyboard player. But a lot of people don't know, Julius is also a bass player, a guitar player, a drummer. He's an incredible producer and composer. He does everything. And I got the text message from Ben as the flight landed in Pittsburgh, and I looked around the plane like, do I see any bass players here? And I turned around at Julius in first class behind me, and I woke him up and I said, hey, do you want to play bass on my gig? And that's how it went down.
All right. That's what you got to do.
And he did an amazing job. I mean, anytime I've ever played with Julius, he's a very special individual who like immediately raises the level of the music. So for him to come in and have never heard my music before, I sent him a Dropbox with charts and MP3s. He learned the whole set in about an hour. And I thought the experience of getting to play with him, because he played keyboard bass and electric bass. And I don't usually play with keyboard bass. That's a very new format for me. So given that everything was pretty stressful, I thought it was a really unique and gratifying musical experience, and I'm kind of glad that it worked out the way it did.
Well, you know, I know jazz the way, understand jazz just
Yep.
like you. And if you have musicians of a certain caliber, you just go, okay, can we do this? Sure. And then you just go do it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And that's the way it is. Well, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, Chelsea, this was very delightful. You and King. You. King, he's just such a love. Thank you so much for spending time here with us in the Jazz Room.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Here is Sentiments of Solitude. We've come to the end of another show. Thank you for spending time here with us in the Jazz Room. You may see photos of Chelsea Baratz and her little dog, King, and many more artists on the Jazz Room page of my website, JoanWatsonJones.com. Until next time, you've been in the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson Jones.
The Jazz Room is distributed by M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.